When a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything, Lord, there is one thing they fear more than being confronted. They fear being irrelevant. Because once the person they took for granted stops caring, the narcissist loses something they depended on more than they realize. And that loss creates fears they rarely admit. Today, we're going to explore what a narcissist fears most after hurting someone who gave them everything. These fears are not always visible on the surface, but once you understand them, you begin to see the hidden motivations behind many of their reactions. If you're learning how narcissistic dynamics really work, subscribe now. Comment, I choose peace if you're reclaiming your emotional freedom. Share this video with someone who needs clarity about toxic relationships. And stay with me because understanding this can change how you heal and move forward. One of the greatest fears a narcissist experiences after hurting someone who gave them everything is the loss of their source of validation. For many people, relationships are built on mutual care, empathy, and shared growth. But for someone with strong narcissistic traits, relationships often serve a different psychological purpose. They become a steady supply of admiration, reassurance, attention, and emotional reinforcement that keeps the narcissist's fragile sense of self intact. When someone gives everything in a relationship with a narcissist, they often provide exactly the kind of validation the narcissist depends on. They listen, they support, they forgive, and they often try harder to make the relationship work even when problems appear. This kind of loyalty becomes incredibly valuable to the narcissist, not necessarily because they deeply appreciate it, but because it fuels their sense of importance and control. In many cases, the narcissist becomes accustomed to this constant reinforcement. They expect their partner, friend, or family member to admire them, defend them, and prioritize their needs. Over time, this dynamic can create a strong imbalance in the relationship. One person is giving enormous emotional energy, while the other is primarily receiving it. But when the narcissist hurts that person, perhaps through betrayal, manipulation, or emotional cruelty, something begins to change. The person who once gave endless validation may begin to withdraw. They may become quieter, less responsive, or emotionally distant. They may start setting boundaries or limiting contact. And for the narcissist, this shift can feel deeply unsettling. What they are losing is not just a relationship. They are losing a reliable mirror that reflected admiration and attention back at them. Without that mirror, their sense of identity becomes less stable. Narcissistic personalities often rely heavily on external validation to maintain their self-image. When that validation disappears, it can create a sense of emptiness or insecurity that they struggle to tolerate. This is why narcissists often react strongly when someone who once supported them begins to pull away. At first, they may try to dismiss the change. They might act as though they do not care or suggest that the relationship was never that important. But beneath that surface reaction is often a growing awareness that something valuable has been lost. In many cases, the narcissist will attempt to restore the validation they once received. This may involve reaching out with charm, affection, or nostalgia. They might remind the person of the good times they shared or speak about how much they miss the connection. These gestures can seem sincere, especially to someone who still carries emotional attachment. But often the deeper motivation is the desire to regain the steady flow of admiration and emotional support that once existed. Another way narcissists try to compensate for this loss is by seeking validation elsewhere. They may quickly turn their attention to new relationships, new friendships, or new social environments where they can once again receive praise and attention. This search for replacement validation can happen surprisingly quickly, not because the narcissist has fully moved on emotionally, but because they urgently need to restore that external reinforcement. For the person who gave everything, watching this process unfold can be deeply confusing and painful. It may feel as though the years of care and devotion meant very little, especially if the narcissist seems able to replace the relationship so easily. But understanding the underlying dynamics can help bring clarity. The narcissist's fear is not necessarily about losing you as a person in the way emotionally healthy relationships experience loss. Their fear is about losing the role you played in supporting their self-image. You were someone who believed in them, who provided attention and encouragement, and who reinforced their sense of importance. When that source disappears, it disrupts the psychological structure they depended on. Recognizing this can be an important step in healing. It allows you to see that your generosity and loyalty were real, even if they were not valued in the way you deserved. The validation you provided was powerful, which is exactly why its absence now feels threatening to the narcissist. At the same time, this realization can help shift the focus back to your own well-being. The energy and attention you once directed toward supporting someone else can now be redirected toward rebuilding your own sense of stability and self-respect. Instead of being the mirror that reflects someone else's ego, you can begin focusing on your own growth, boundaries, and emotional peace. In the end, the narcissist's fear of losing validation reveals something important about the relationship dynamic. What appeared to be deep appreciation was often dependency on admiration, and when the person who gave everything finally steps away, the narcissist is left confronting a silence where that validation once existed. Another powerful fear that emerges when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything is the fear of exposure. While narcissists often appear confident and self-assured on the surface, many of their behaviors are carefully hidden behind a controlled image. They work hard to maintain a reputation that presents them as admirable, kind, intelligent, or successful. To the outside world, they may seem charming and charismatic, but the person closest to them, the one who gave them everything, has usually seen a very different side. This is why exposure becomes such a deep fear. The person who was once loyal, supportive, and emotionally invested is also the person who witnessed the narcissist's private behavior. They saw the manipulation, the emotional coldness, the shifting blame, and the moments when the narcissist's true personality appeared behind the mask. As long as the relationship remained intact, the narcissist could rely on that person's loyalty to keep those experiences private. But once the relationship breaks down, especially after the narcissist has caused serious hurt, that sense of protection disappears. The narcissist understands that the person they hurt now holds knowledge that could challenge the carefully crafted image they present to the world. Friends, family members, coworkers, and social circles often see only the charming or successful version of the narcissist. If the truth about the relationship were revealed, it could create cracks in that image. Even the possibility of those cracks can feel threatening. Because of this fear, narcissists often take steps to protect their reputation before any exposure can occur. One common strategy is to control the narrative by speaking first. They may begin telling others their version of the story, portraying themselves as misunderstood or even victimized. In their telling, the person they hurt may be described as overly sensitive, dramatic, unstable, or difficult. By planting these ideas early, the narcissist attempts to shape how others will interpret any future information. This tactic serves a very strategic purpose. If the person who was hurt eventually speaks about the relationship, others may already have doubts about their credibility. The narcissist's earlier narrative acts like a shield, making it easier for them to dismiss criticism or accusations. It is a form of preemptive reputation management. In some cases, the narcissist may go further by subtly discrediting the person they hurt. They might mention small flaws, exaggerate conflicts, or hint that the relationship was far more problematic than it actually was. These comments may appear casual, but they serve to reshape how others view the situation. The goal is not necessarily to destroy the other person's reputation completely, but to create enough uncertainty that the narcissist's own image remains protected. What makes this dynamic especially painful for the person who gave everything is that they often never intended to expose the narcissist in the first place. Many people in these situations simply want distance and healing. They may still value privacy and may not wish to speak openly about the relationship. Yet the narcissist's fear of exposure can drive them to act defensively or aggressively, even when no public confrontation has occurred. This fear reveals something important about the narcissist's inner world. Despite the confident persona they present, their identity often depends heavily on how others perceive them. Reputation is not just a social advantage, it becomes part of their psychological stability. The thought that others might see a less flattering version of them can create intense discomfort. Because of this, narcissists may react strongly to even small signs that their behavior could become known. A simple conversation, a social media post, or a shift in how mutual friends behave can sometimes trigger defensive reactions. They may attempt to reconnect, to persuade the person who was hurt to remain silent, or to convince them that discussing the relationship would be unfair or damaging. For the person who gave everything, understanding this fear can provide clarity. It explains why the narcissist may appear unusually concerned about their image or about what others think of the situation. The focus often remains on reputation, rather than on genuine repair of the harm that occurred. Recognizing this pattern can also empower you to step away from the pressure to protect the narcissist's image. You are not responsible for maintaining someone else's carefully constructed narrative, especially when that narrative ignores the reality of your experience. Healing often requires honesty, whether that honesty is shared publicly or simply acknowledged privately within yourself. Ultimately, the narcissist's fear of exposure reflects the fragile foundation beneath their public confidence. The person who gave them everything became a witness to both the charming exterior and the hidden behavior beneath it. When the relationship ends after harm has been done, the narcissist understands that the truth about them no longer rests safely behind closed doors, and that possibility, more than many other consequences, is something they deeply fear. One of the deepest fears a narcissist faces after hurting someone who gave them everything is the possibility that the person they hurt will become emotionally independent. At the beginning of many narcissistic relationships, there is often a strong emotional bond that forms quickly. The narcissist may present themselves as attentive, charming, and deeply interested in the other person. This early stage can make the relationship feel intense and meaningful. The person who is drawn into it often becomes highly invested, offering loyalty, patience, and emotional support. Over time, however, the relationship can begin to revolve more around the narcissist's needs. The person who gave everything may gradually take on the role of caretaker, supporter, and emotional anchor. They listen to problems, defend the narcissist in difficult situations, and try to maintain harmony even when conflicts arise. This dynamic creates a form of emotional dependency that benefits the narcissist. As long as the other person remains deeply invested and reactive, the narcissist continues to feel important and influential. When the narcissist eventually hurts that person through betrayal, disrespect, or manipulation, they often assume the dynamic will continue. They may expect that the person who gave everything will forgive them again, return to the relationship, or remain emotionally affected by their actions. Narcissists frequently rely on the belief that their influence over the other person will not truly disappear. But something very powerful happens when the injured person begins to change internally. Instead of chasing explanations, arguing, or trying to repair the relationship at all costs, they start focusing on their own healing. They begin setting boundaries. They become calmer in the face of provocation. They stop reacting emotionally to the narcissist's behavior. Gradually, their emotional center shifts away from the narcissist and back toward themselves. For the narcissist, this transformation can feel deeply threatening. Emotional independence removes the leverage that once existed in the relationship. When someone is no longer seeking validation, approval, or closure from them, the narcissist loses a key source of influence. The reactions that once fueled their sense of importance begin to fade. What often unsettles narcissists the most is the calmness that accompanies true emotional independence. In the past, the person who gave everything may have responded to hurt with intense emotion, anger, sadness, pleading, or long conversations about what went wrong. Those reactions confirmed that the narcissist still had a strong emotional impact. Even conflict could serve as a form of attention and validation. But when the person who was hurt becomes emotionally steady and detached, the dynamic changes completely. Conversations become brief or neutral. Arguments no longer escalate. Attempts to provoke a reaction may simply be ignored. This quiet stability sends a powerful message. The narcissist no longer holds the same emotional power. For many narcissists, this shift creates a sense of loss that is difficult to accept. They may attempt to re-engage the person emotionally through various strategies. Sometimes they try charm, reaching out with friendly messages, compliments, or nostalgic memories. At other times, they may attempt criticism or provocation, hoping to trigger a reaction that reopens the emotional connection. The goal of these behaviors is often the same: to test whether the person is truly independent or whether the old dynamic can be revived. If the injured person responds strongly, the narcissist may interpret that reaction as evidence that their influence still exists. But if the response remains calm, distant, or minimal, the narcissist begins to recognize that something fundamental has changed. This realization can be unsettling because emotional independence exposes the limits of the narcissist's control. It demonstrates that the person who once gave everything is capable of building a life that no longer revolves around them. The admiration, attention, and emotional focus that once flowed toward the narcissist are now being directed elsewhere, toward personal growth, healthier relationships, or simply a more peaceful way of living. For the person who was hurt, Reaching this stage often represents a profound turning point. Emotional independence does not mean forgetting the past or pretending the relationship never mattered. Instead, it means reclaiming control over one's emotional energy. The narcissist is no longer the center of attention, the source of validation, or the main influence over personal well being. Ironically, this quiet independence often has a stronger impact on the narcissist than confrontation ever did. Arguments and emotional reactions kept the connection alive even when it was painful, but indifference and calm detachment removed the emotional stage on which the narcissist once performed. In the end, the narcissist's fear of emotional independence reveals how much their sense of power depended on the other person's reactions. When someone who gave everything learns to stand calmly on their own, the balance of the relationship shifts permanently. The narcissist may still attempt to reach back into the past, but the emotional door that once remained open is no longer the same. And that quiet, steady independence is something they find very difficult to face. Another major fear a narcissist experiences after hurting someone who gave them everything is the loss of control over the narrative. For many narcissists, controlling how a story is told is just as important as controlling the relationship itself. They rely heavily on shaping perceptions, how others see them, how conflicts are interpreted, and how the relationship is remembered. When someone who once protected their image begins to step away, that control becomes much harder to maintain. During the relationship, the person who gave everything often acted as a silent guardian of the narcissist's reputation. They may have defended the narcissist when others questioned their behavior. They may have minimized problems or kept painful experiences private in order to protect the relationship. This loyalty allowed the narcissist to maintain a consistent public image while their private behavior remained hidden. But when the narcissist hurts that person and the relationship begins to collapse, the situation changes. The person who once protected the narrative is no longer obligated to do so. Even if they choose not to speak publicly about the relationship, the narcissist can sense that the protective barrier has weakened. The possibility that the truth might emerge becomes a source of deep anxiety. For a narcissist, reputation is closely tied to identity. They often construct a version of themselves that appears admirable, successful, generous, or emotionally mature. This image may be reinforced through social circles, professional environments, or family dynamics. The narrative they present becomes part of how they maintain status and validation. If the person who gave everything begins to share their experience, even in small ways, it can challenge that carefully built identity. Friends or family members might begin asking questions. People may notice inconsistencies between the narcissist's public image and the reality described by someone who knew them closely. Even subtle shifts in perception can feel threatening to someone who depends on admiration and approval. Because of this fear, narcissists often work hard to stay ahead of the narrative. One common tactic is to tell their version of events first. By presenting themselves as the victim of misunderstanding or unfair treatment, they attempt to frame the situation before anyone else can describe it differently. In this version of the story, the person who gave everything may be portrayed as difficult, overly emotional, or impossible to satisfy. This strategy serves an important purpose. If others hear this narrative early, they may interpret any conflicting information through that lens. When the injured person eventually speaks about the relationship, some listeners may already have doubts about their credibility. The narcissist's version of the story becomes a shield against criticism. Another way narcissists attempt to control the narrative is by selectively sharing information. They might reveal certain details that make them appear reasonable while leaving out key parts of the story that show their harmful behavior. By carefully choosing what to disclose and what to hide, they create a picture that supports their image while avoiding full accountability. For the person who gave everything, witnessing this manipulation can be deeply frustrating. It may feel as though the truth is being twisted or erased. You might hear rumors or distorted versions of events that do not match your experience at all. This can lead to feelings of powerlessness, especially if others initially believe the narcissist's account. However, it is important to recognize that this fear of losing narrative control reveals something important about the narcissist. Despite their outward confidence, they depend heavily on external validation and approval. The idea that others might see them differently threatens the foundation of their identity. Understanding this dynamic can also help you step away from the exhausting battle over who tells the story. In many cases, trying to confront or correct every false narrative can drain emotional energy without changing the narcissist's behavior. Narcissists often continue adjusting their stories to protect their image. Instead, healing often involves reclaiming your own truth without needing the narcissist to acknowledge it. Your experience remains valid whether or not the narcissist admits it publicly. The memories, the effort you gave, and the lessons you learned are real, even if the narcissist tries to rewrite the past. Over time, actions tend to reveal more than narratives. People who observe the narcissist closely may begin noticing patterns on their own. Meanwhile, the person who once gave everything can focus on rebuilding a life that is no longer defined by someone else's story. Ultimately, the narcissist's fear of losing control over the narrative highlights how much energy they invest in managing appearances. When the person they hurt steps away and begins living authentically, that control becomes harder to maintain. And in that moment, the narcissist realizes something unsettling. The story they worked so hard to manage is no longer entirely in their hands.